Today I want to tell you about the camera that did change my life in a way. Of course, the camera doesn't change life, but it did change the way that I feel about photography, the way that I approach photography, and the type of photography that I'm taking these days. So today we're going to be talking about Leica cameras, and most specifically, we're going to be talking about my Leica M11, which is right now the camera that I carry pretty much 24 hours. Yeah, sometimes I even go to sleep with the camera. Now, I know that you have heard a lot about Leica in recent years, especially with the Q line, have made Leica more popular than ever before, which it happens to be the first camera that I got was the Leica Q2. But in today's video, I want to talk about this camera because it's completely different than the Leica Q2, 100% manual. And perhaps if you have been a mirrorless shooter, someone that was shooting for a lot of years with autofocusing system, and you're starting to feel a little bit bored about shooting with those cameras, well, this video is for you. Early this year, I have to surrender the lease of my studio. Some of you guys have seen the studio. I actually have a video right here in the channel. You can go and check it out. And pretty much for all the years that I owned the studio, and I had it in 2 different locations, I've been doing tons of portraits, corporate work. That's been my main bread and butter, and I thought that that's the thing that I'm attracted the most. But since I don't have the studio, I've been going out on the street and just pretty much shooting what I see. And, I've been traveling around for the past 15 years because of my job and visiting different countries. And I love shooting travel photography. It's something that I really love. But every time I travel, I seem to be gravitating for photographing people or the things that happen in particular places, or, things that I find unique of a corner, of a block. And my photography has transitioned to pretty much that right now. I've been doing tons of street photography, and this is when this camera came to play. Like I mentioned before, I surrendered the lease of my studio earlier this year. I'm looking to migrate the studio near to where I am. But because of that, I was shooting, I started shooting a lot on the streets, and I was shooting with my Sony cameras, right? And, I love just to grab a camera, point at something and shoot, but to be honest with you, doing this almost daily, I started feeling a little bit boring about, just letting the camera pretty much handle the whole aspect of my photography. And I started shooting with films, back in the days with my dad's camera. And I remember the joy of just nailing focus on an image, develop the image, and yes, you got it in focus. I mean, there's something that, that joy was actually taken away from me years and years ago, because I've been shooting pretty much for more than half of my life now with mirrorless cameras. So enter the Leica M11, a camera that brought the fun back to me. And that's the reason why I'm mentioning, at the beginning, that this camera kind of like changed my life, because everything about this camera is exactly what I remember loving back in the days about shooting cameras. Let's actually move on right now talking about this camera, because there's a lot to unpack, and perhaps you've been hearing videos of people talking about their experience with Leica cameras. And to be honest with you, the first one that I got was the Leica Q2. I've made videos about the Leica Q2 as well in the past. I now own the Leica Q3, but the Leica Q2 and the Leica Q3 are still cameras that are very similar to a Sony camera. A lot of automation, autofocus, the whole thing, right? Yes, they do have a little bit of the retro aspect of this camera, the simplified dials and so on. But this camera right here is completely manual. And that's one of the things that I like about this camera. In this camera, you only have photography features. That's the main thing about this camera. So there's no video or overheating in 4K to complain about, because this camera just doesn't record any type of video. So I want to walk you through the camera itself, and I may do a proper review, but like I mentioned before, this is going to be a straight up conversation with you guys. Maybe you'll play before you go to sleep, and I hope you fall asleep. So one of the things that you're going to realize here in this camera is how simple the camera is. So we have an ISO dial right over here that to activate it, you have to pop it up like I did. And then you have a shutter speed dial right over here that goes up to 1/4000 of a second. But we do have electronic shutter that can actually go up to 1/16,000 of a second. And I believe the camera that can go even beyond that is my Sony A1. But any of the other Sony cameras usually cap at 1/8000 of a second. So having a camera that can actually go above 1/8000 of a second. That means that you can shoot with fast lenses without using ND filters. And that to me has been almost life revealing or game changer in my opinion, because again, it adds to the simplicity of the setup. Just pick up a camera, pick up a lens. It doesn't matter if you're gonna be shooting in super bright conditions. I live here in Miami, so bright conditions are pretty often, or if you're gonna be shooting at night. Like for example, the lens that I have right here is the Voigtlander 35mm f1.4 version 2, the Noctum version 2 multi-coated, super tiny lens. And this one is a f1.4 lens. Now look at my hand and look at that glass. And again, that's something that really attracted me to this camera, is the portability of the full frame bodies and the small size of the lenses. And of course, because they don't have autofocus, these lenses, can actually be smaller than average, because there are some lenses that are gonna be bigger and heavy as well. We'll talk about those probably later on. Now, take a look at here. On the top right next to the shutter speed, we have simply an on-off button switch, a rocker with the shutter release right over there. And this is the back of the camera. Super, super simple. We have the play option right here. We have the function right over here, and this is the menu and a simple D-pad. Now, this can be used as just to navigate, because this camera does not gonna have a focus point that you can drive around the screen. I'm gonna turn on the camera so you can actually see the screen. The screen is actually plenty of bright, and it has the information displayed in a way that, in my opinion, does not interfere with all that stuff. And if I want just to have the screen displaying my image, I can press this button, hide everything, and call whenever I'm ready. So super simple, the operation. And again, probably I'm gonna do a proper review of this camera, how the menus operate, because this camera, in my opinion, has nailed pretty much everything. It is the best menu by far out of any single camera. Really easy to navigate. You just tap menu, 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 and you just go through the options. There are no so much nesting. The text is pretty big. The tabs are pretty big. Things are where you think you're gonna find them. Unlike, for example, Sony cameras that keeps changing menus, and it takes me forever to remember where things are. But this camera is super simple to navigate and get to where you wanna get. Now, one of the things that actually attracts me the most about this camera is going to be the range finder. And for those that are not familiar with range finder, pretty much the range finder is going to be a window, but now it's just a clear window that is coupled to the lens. So the range finder, it's not like an EVF, an electronic EVF, where it's pretty much a mirror of your screen into a tiny screen. This thing is just an optical glass. I mean, they just look through, and it's coupled with a lens where to focus, you gotta align a patch with another patch, and when both patches are aligned, that's when your image is in focus. And that's how cameras used to be back in the days, the rangefinder style cameras. And to be honest with you, after complaining refresh rates and resolution and brightness and things, I just realized that being constrained to this type of system makes me feel more connected to the photo, because I'm not seeing the photo being processed by the sensor. I am seeing the image how I see it with my eyes. And if you have shot with film cameras before, that's pretty much the way it is. You just see a clean image of the reality. You don't see a digital image of the reality, which is something that you're gonna see with any mirrorless camera these days. And once again, you are more connected with the image, in my opinion. And it's kind of, right? It's kind of like when I at least used to shoot a photo, and then you're gonna have to wait to develop that photo to see how it is. Now with mirrorless camera, what you see and press the shutter is exactly what you get. So that emotion got taken away from me, and now it's back with this camera. So that's that. Now, the other thing that I like about this camera is the form factor, right? And we usually complain about cameras not having a deep grip or so on. And this camera actually has a grip that I added myself, but I have it because, I was curious about the grip, but the way I shoot this camera mainly is like this. And as you can see, this would be kind of like a camera that in the past I would actually complain about. Wow, there's not enough grip. And to be honest with you, the fact that now I'm carrying this camera pretty much with light lenses makes me appreciate the lack of grip. It's also, a factor that adds to the pocketability of this camera, because I can actually put this in a jacket, no problem. And the way I hold my camera, it's just pretty much like that, right? one finger, tuck it at the bottom, and the other one like this. It's really easy to handle, you know? And something that I got to appreciate with this camera is because, you know, I've been getting the smaller lenses from Leica and Voigtlander. So let me actually show you the first kit I built when I got my M11, because I now own more glass, but I'm just gonna show you the main glass that I carry pretty much everywhere. So the one that I showed you right now was the Nikon 35mm f1.4 version 2, which is my, you know, everyday focal length. I love the 35mm and the fact that this one is plenty fast. Now, some of the things that you're gonna find with some of these Voigtlander lenses or Leica lenses, they are not clinically sharp, meaning that, you know, if you zoom in, you're not gonna see the tree in the background with the veins of every single leaves. It has a much more filmy look or cinematic look, if you want to call it. So these lenses would be probably something that in the past I would complain about, you know, because I was so into sharpness and, you know, FA for portraiture and, you know, making sure that I can see every single hair. Now with these lenses, it's more of a painterly outcome. And that's what I like about this Voigtlander right here. It's more like a painterly outcome, you know, like the dreamy look. The dreamy look that a lot of the times, you know, we have to pop filters in our mirrorless camera just to kind of like ease away the sharpness of some of the glass from Sony. And again, I still love my Sony cameras, don't get me wrong. That's the camera that I pick up if I have a gig and if I have to shoot and I cannot miss, you know, the shot, or I cannot afford to reshoot it. I mean, I'm still shooting with Sony cameras and there's nothing wrong with them, love them. But again, it's a complete different feel for me. You know, it's really good. So the whole experience of shooting with this camera is gonna be very analog and with a modern touch. That's that. Now the second lens that I purchased was very expensive. I paid $2,700 for this lens. And this one that you see right over here is the 28mm f2.8 Ultimate lens. Again, all lenses for the Leica M-mount are gonna be manual. And this one is an expensive lens for a 28mm lens that has not a super fast aperture, but an f2.8. Now, again, one of the reasons why I like this lens is because I got to try it at the Leica store first, and took a couple of pictures, came home, reviewed the pictures, and completely fell in love. Again, same effect, you know, things are gonna have the vintage look. While the lens is actually sharp, the rendition is not as clinically sharp as modern lens. And now, you know, experimenting with the street, having a wide angle lens is going to be kind of like a no-brainer. You have to have a wide angle lens, especially for travel, for landmarks, for, you know, buildings and things like that. You know, you can capture a lot in your frame, and this lens, you know, is the one that I have. The other lens that I actually got, I have to have a 50mm. You know, there's no way that I'm not gonna get a 50mm. So I do have a 50mm, and this is another lens that I bought. Also is another Leica lens. Now, all of my Leica glass, you know, I bought it used, aside from two other glasses that I'll talk in another video that are modern, actually their latest release. But this one right here is the Summicron 50mm Apo f2. Now this lens is fast. It's an f2 lens. Also, it's small. Now it's not the lightest lens out there. As you can see, it's just very, very tiny. Very, very tiny. It's not as light as the 28, for example, but it's still pretty light and pretty compact. That's one of the things that I like about this lens, and the image quality is incredible. Now, when you hear from a Leica lens, the Apo denomination, that means that the lens has very controlled chromatic aberrations and artifacts. So the vignetting in this lens is gonna be less than in other lenses or other 50mm from Leica or Voigtlander, for example, but there is almost no chromatic aberration. And when you shoot it open up wide at f2, you know, you are going to think that you have, you know, an Apple lens in your kit. Look how small this lens is. So that's pretty much what I got at the beginning of, you know, what I've been shooting with my Leica M11. This is gonna be the video for today, guys. Straight conversation. Let me know if you have any particular question about this camera. And that's gonna be it. Until then, I'll see you in the next video.